What is going on, UFC card lovers? Welcome back here to UFC Card Talk. My name is Damien, and here at UFC Card Talk, not only do we talk about everything to do with UFC cards, from collecting to investing and also recent UFC card hobby news. We are coming to the end of 2022, so I just want to say I hope you guys out there had a very Merry Christmas. You're enjoying your holidays, you're enjoying your time with the family. Hopefully you had some packs to rip, some boxes to open during this Christmas break. I thought what would be an interesting video to do today is just a recap of 2022 and the lessons that I have learned in my first year within the UFC sports card community. Starting out as a beginner in this hobby is not as simple as you would first think it is, and there's plenty of mistakes that you can make along the way, which some of those mistakes are necessary to be made yourself, but also I feel like there are some things that if you can learn, if somebody can maybe give you some tips and tricks, that it can overall help your hobby experience, which I think is the most important thing. Whether you are getting into UFC cards to collect or invest, there are some tips that I think can help some of those newer collectors out there. After going over those things, I also thought I want to show my 5 favorite purchases from 2022. Unfortunately, these aren't going to be my overall 5 favorite purchases because some of my favorite cards are sitting with family in Australia. I, of course, myself, if you are new to the channel, I am Australian, but I am living in Sweden. And when I first started getting into buying and collecting UFC cards, I was having them shipped to my family in Australia to save on both postage and also on import tax. So a lot of my first cards, before I discovered the service Ship My Cards, I did have shipped to Australia, so I will not be able to have them in hand until sometime next year. But nevertheless, I still do have 5 great cards that I do really enjoy that I want to share with you guys today. Some of them you've seen before, but some of them you haven't. And I just thought it would be fun to show my favorite in-hand purchases from 2022. So let's get into the video. Starting off with the 5 lessons that I've learned from my first year of collecting in the hobby. And that is, number 1, it might sound simple, but it is true. You need to set a budget. If you're anything like me, whether you're buying cards weekly, daily, monthly, you do need to set an average monthly budget that you do want to spend on cards. Obviously, sometimes it is impossible to stick to that budget. You're going to find these cards that you just think that you need to have, that you need, whether you've already spent your monthly budget or not. But as long as you have in your mind and you're honest with yourself with how much you can actually afford to spend on cards without using credit or anything like that, then it's a very good thing to have a set figure in your head that you know that you can actually afford to be spending on these UFC sports cards. At the end of the day, they are not a necessity. They're not going to help you feed your family. They're not going to help put fuel in your car. They're not going to help keep the power on at night. So it is important to have priorities. As much as UFC cards are fun and maybe you can make a little bit of money buying and selling here and there, you do need to be honest with yourself and have the responsibility to set a budget. Leaning into that, lesson number 2 is learning about FOMO. Of course, FOMO stands for fear of missing out, and you're going to experience a lot of this when you first get into buying UFC cards. And even if you're not new to the hobby, I myself and other people who have been in the hobby much longer than me are still going to experience fear of missing out. They are going to see these cards that pop up on these marketplaces and they're going to feel like they have to buy that card now. Whether it be a rarer card, whether it's a card that they've wanted in a high grade, they're going to think to themselves that this is their only one and only chance to buy this card. And a lot of the time, these cards are going to be up for auction. People get emotional when it comes to auction, to bidding on auctions. It's easy to basically pay too much for cards. As much as you can pay whatever you want for your cards, as I said, as long as it's fitting into your budget, there's definitely timing when it comes to buying cards. And for anyone who's been in the hobby for longer than 6 months, they know well now if they had waited 6 months for some of their previous purchases, had they bought them today in today's market, they would have paid significantly less for some of these really rare and nice cards. One tip that I would give to sort of help curb the fear of missing out would be to use a bid sniping service. And what I actually think to do is a little bit fun. Obviously, if you've had anything to do with eBay auctions, any marketplace auctions, no one tends to bid seriously until the last hour, the last half an hour, the last few minutes on an auction. So what I think is fun to do, and I actually found this has helped me, whether it's going to help you, you won't have to try to find out. But I use a bid sniping service. It's just a website called Bid Slammer. It connects with your eBay account, and basically what I'll do is I'll just put significantly low bids in for cards. And I don't expect to win them, but what I find is, of course, if you do win them, you've put in a really low, relatively low bid. So if you win them, you actually end up being quite happy because you've won a card that you didn't expect to win. But 99.8% of the time, you're not going to win. But at least you sort of feel like you have skin in the game. You feel like that you are participating in the hobby without actually participating, because it's a very, very low percentage chance that you're going to win, providing you are bidding on a card that you actually want and your bid is something that's just a little bit ridiculously low. So that's one thing that I've found can really help me with my FOMO is I will just put, for example, say there's a Sean O'Malley. It's a PSA 10 of his first year Silver Prism. That comps around normally between anywhere from $150 to $200. Say there's a bid out, an auction ending, I will put a bid snipe for $30, say. Because obviously the auction might be sitting at $20 at the current time, and that explodes obviously in the last few minutes before an auction ends. So as long as you're not sitting there watching the auction end, that's why I recommend you use a sniping service, because you can just set it and forget it. But you still feel like that you have a potential chance of winning that card. And if you win that card at that price, then that's fantastic. Just a little example of something you can do to help with that fear of missing out, because you are going to experience that within the hobby. Leading into my third lesson, eBay is not, in my opinion, the best place to be buying cards. eBay is obviously one of the biggest marketplaces there is for buying and selling sports cards. Of course, there are some deals to be had, but they are deals that are very far and few between. The best way, in my opinion, to be buying cards and trading cards and not having to pay those fees, whether you're the buyer or the seller on eBay, whether it be through tax, or selling fees, is to look at buying cards on other marketplaces, and best off start with social media platforms. Get involved in the UFC card community on Instagram. A bunch of great guys. Message people. You can feel free to message me at UFC Card Talk. Always happy to share whatever I can, help people out who have questions within the hobby. I am by far not an expert, but there's plenty of other guys who know better than me, and I'm sure if you were to send them a message on Instagram, on Facebook, they would be more than happy to help you out. So I would start there first, because you can often find people will post cards for sale and they are much more reasonably priced than what you're going to be paying on any of these marketplaces. Next off, obviously after Instagram, after Facebook groups, you can look at other websites. Beckett Marketplace, for example, I have picked up some fantastic cards for my own collection through Beckett. Being an older site, there is cards that have been listed there since before the boom of UFC, of sports cards in 2020, 2021. So you will find some cards on other websites. PWCC, another auction website, same thing. Not guaranteed that you're going to get cards cheaper on there compared to eBay, but it is just another platform that has lower selling fees, and also you can find those odd rare cards. Other websites such as MySlabs, and also Discord groups. I'm a part of a Discord group, so shout out to those guys. The Discord group is discord.gg/UFC cards. Just get amongst the UFC card community on Instagram, on a Discord, and get chatting with other collectors/investors, and it's just one of the best things you can do within the hobby. Leading into my lesson number 4, and not to say that these are any in particular order, but I will highlight this one in particular. I think that this is being for me personally, one of the most important lessons. And that is, use your free time. Instead of scrolling eBay, instead of scrolling marketplaces, use your time to research and read and learn about UFC card sets, not only from the present, but also the past. One of the great things about UFC cards is they've only been around commercially since 2009 when the first Topps set came out. That is really not that long ago. That is only 13 years of cards that you need to go back and look through the sets. If you were to try and learn about baseball cards, basketball cards that have been around for decades and decades, there's so much more that you've got to go through, so much more material you've got to learn. But thankfully with UFC cards, they are still relatively new and they're relatively easy to learn about these card sets and be able to make better, more smarter decisions when it comes to especially investing. Obviously, I always say you can buy whatever card you think looks cool, whether that's Panini, whether that's Topps. Buy whatever cards you want when it comes to collecting, but there is definitely a market, and I am one of those guys who do like to buy cards, holding them for whether they be long-term, short-term, holding them, hoping that they increase in value. So the best way to have a chance of doing that is to actually learn about some of these older Topps UFC sets. It's no secret that Panini have printed a lot of products, especially UFC, since Panini's had that licensing. They have printed so many cards. So if you were to go back, I feel like I'm telling people what to do, but I honestly feel like more people need to go back, check out these older Topps sets and appreciate them more. I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't believe in it. I know I like to speculate a lot on my channel, but I do just want to help you guys out. And this is really one thing I do want to place emphasis on, is that when it comes to investing, I need to say, when it comes to investing or buying a card hoping that you can make a profit off it in the future, whether it's short-term or long-term future, you really need to think of the card that you're buying, not only the fighter. Of course, you could go out, you can buy a Conor McGregor Select Disco from 2022. Could be a PSA 10. Maybe you've paid a couple of $100 for it. That is not a guaranteed investment. You need to look and learn about what cards are important, because they're the ones that are going to hold value long term. And in order to do that, you need to research and learn about sets for yourself so you can make more well-informed decisions about the card that you're actually buying, the rarity, the scarcity, and it's not just manufactured rarity. I would say that a lot of the Panini products are what I would call manufactured rarity. Even the Prism. I understand Prism is a great product, especially that first release of Prism for UFC last year in 2021. But a lot of the numbered parallels, they're not rare. They're just manufactured rarity, meaning that they've just been given a number on the card in order for you to think of them as something that are rare, worthy of holding long term. Because the difference between Prism parallels, whether the number be 1 to 10 or whether the number be 1 to 99 or 1 to 275, it's literally the exact same picture, it's just a different color of cardboard. Alright, now leading into my last lesson number 5, is whether you're collecting or investing. Obviously this is a no-brainer if you're collecting, but even if you're investing, if you're buying a card that you're hoping to hold long term in order for the value to go up, make sure it is a card that you actually like. I can't stress this enough, guys, because chances are the card that you're buying, hoping that it's going to be worth 2x, 3x, 5x in the long term, chances are it's probably not, to be completely honest. And not to burst anyone's bubbles, of course, there's plenty of cards that will, but I think it's very important. You need to keep in mind whatever you're buying, whether it be for a long-term hold, for a short-term hold, it needs to be a card that you actually like. Whether it's a fighter that you like, whether it's a design of card that you like, aesthetically, there needs to be something that you like about that card other than just the potential value in it. Because if you go out to buy cards just only for the value of it, I don't think you're going to enjoy yourself. There's going to be too many times you get burnt holding cards that you've paid money for that you didn't even particularly like. Of course, I'm always the first to admit there's plenty of cards that I have bought that I hope that increases in value. There's cards, of course, that I've bought just for my own PC that whether they go up or down, that's neither here nor there. I've actually bought these cards because I like them aesthetically. I think that they're cool and they remind me of at a specific event that a fighter had. So, as I said, do what you want, but I really do think that people are going to enjoy the hobby more if they've purchased cards that they like, regardless of if they want to sell it in the future or not. So that's it, guys. They're the 5 lessons that I've learned. I hope you can take maybe 1 or 2 things away from me just speaking about those. As I said, I'm not an expert by any means. As somebody who's making content, I just feel like it's important if there's something that I can share with you guys through my own experiences that is really going to help you, whether it's collecting, whether it's investing. I just want people to have a great time in this hobby, because that is really the main thing for me. So now, the funner part. So starting off, showing some of my favourite buys from my first year of collecting UFC cards. Starting off with my first pull. Believe it or not, the only product I have personally opened myself is 2021 Chronicles. Not even hobby, it's just been retail. That's all I've had access to here. And for me, ripping packs is not something that I look to do in order to get my money back. It's just something that's fun, it's exciting. Even if it's a lower end product, it's still just fun, the excitement. Maybe you're going to pull a card of a guy who you PC. So, this has been my favourite pull from this year, from a couple of packs that I've bought. And it is the 2021, it's the Score Conor McGregor. Obviously, it's just the base, but what I really do like about this card, the way that the card's bordered, the image of it, in my mind, this is what a UFC sports card looks like. The Score product has been around for a long time. It was a part of the 2021 Chronicle set. But I just think it's a really cool image. It's got him with a flag wrapped around his shoulders. And it's just, to me, this is everything of what a sports card should look like. Very much an 80s design, early 90s design. So that's been my favourite pull. But now onto my first of my favourite cards. Starting with this one, no particular order. I've shown this one before. It is the 2021. It's the Prism Knockout. Sean O'Malley. It's got him sending Eddie Wallen into another universe with his right hand. This knockout I spoke about before. It was I would watch this event by myself. My partner and I were actually separated through COVID at that time. She was living here in Sweden, I was still in Australia. So it was just emotionally, it was a tough time. And I remember watching that event. It was one of Sean O'Malley's, I think it was his second comeback fight after his suspension/injury. It was in the Apex, that event. And just the walk-off KO, the combination that he used to set up that punch was just absolutely amazing. And I'll never forget that moment, sitting on that couch and going absolutely wild after that knockout by myself, just punching the air. So to have a tangible reminder of that moment, it is something that will be always very special for me. Next up, another Raw card. It is the Max Holloway. I don't know if you can see that clearly there. It is the first ever relic card that I bought. It's the Meaningful Materials from 2017 Topps Museum. Topps Museum, guys, I've said this before as well, is actually one of my favourite releases after Topps Finest probably. There's just some really cool looking cards in there. There's just something I really like about these museum cards. And to have a relic card, Max Holloway is just such a cool guy. Like, obviously in and out of, he's a badass fighter, but even the way he conducts himself, he's just a really cool guy. And for this to be my first ever relic card that I bought, obviously it's numbered to 4. It's numbered 4 of 75. But once again, this is just manufactured rarity. My biggest beef with Topps is all their relic cards, other than the canvas cards, all the relic cards of materials, whether it be shirts, shorts, etc., gloves, they all come from non-specific events or matches, which really actually ruins, for me, the idea of having a relic. It would be cool to know that this piece of fabric on this card was from some UFC event when Max Holloway beat Jose Aldo or something like that. Even if you had to pay a bit more for the card itself, I just think that would be cool to have that. So if you're listening out there, fanatics, that's something you should look at doing. Next, it's my first slab. It is a guy who I PC, a guy who I really enjoyed to watch fight. I just love his style. His fights are always super entertaining. And not only that, another super cool, relaxed guy who is just always smiling in his interviews. He just seems like he's never in a bad mood. And that is Brendan Moreno. Same thing with these rated rookie cards. They just, for me, they are what I expect a sports card to look like for UFC. The bordering on them, the images on them, even the way that rated rookie is on here, the text that they've used, it's just very 80s, very 90s. I'm a kid of the late 80s/90s, so big fan of these rated rookie cards. And for it to be an actual rookie card, to be slabbed up SGC 10, obviously the centering on it is absolutely perfect, which I mentioned is something that's important for me to visually look at the card. This is numbered to 1320, so it was obviously a Panini Instant product that you bought off the website last year. I honestly think I paid like $15 for this card or something like that, which to me is absolutely crazy given the grading fee at the time, and the caliber of fighter that Brendan Moreno is. But love this card. Next up, second last, you guys have seen this one before. And I did just mention before that Topps Finest is probably my favourite UFC set, and this is the 2013. It's a diamond refractor of the guy who I think is the GOAT, GSP. It's a PSA 9. I think the pop count on this card at the moment is like a 3 or 2. There is 2 graded higher with PSA 10s, but I mean that doesn't really matter so much. This card to have in hand, the refraction of the diamond refractors rival that of the silver prisms in my opinion, and GSP is just a legendary fighter who is the true, in my definition, true martial artist, and I just think that's really cool, and I think he's one of the GOATs. So this card, same thing. I really actually enjoy this card. But if this card was to get to a certain amount in the future, which I do think it very much potentially could, being a GSP card, then I will sell this and get into something else. But if it doesn't, I honestly do really like this card, so I'll happily hold it, and I didn't even pay that much for it. And lastly, this shouldn't be any surprise to you guys, the guy who I am absolutely infatuated with, the whole reason why I actually started looking at UFC cards to collect and invest in the first place. But this guy is someone who I always will buy. I know he's very hot right now, but I mean it when I say this, and I hope I can prove it to you guys, maybe people who don't believe me in the future, but win or lose, I will be always forever buying this guy. And anyone also who has watched me from the beginning or watched maybe 10 seconds of my videos know that I love the silver prisms. The refraction on them, they're just so simple, they're just so clean. And this is a PSA 9 if you just didn't see. The population was 15 on this card at the time. Not to say that won't exponentially grow in the future. I would expect it that it would. Almost $60 for this card a month or two ago. Not something that I would look at ever selling, just because I just really love this card. I honestly almost look at this card every day. If I'm having a bad day, I'll come home, I'll come into my room here, and I'll just look at some cards, and this is a card that I always go to grab. So it's a cool image of Sean, got that smug look on his face. It's a vertical card, very important for me. I love vertical cards as opposed to horizontal cards, especially in a slab. And it's the first year of Panini Prism, which I also think is super iconic. Silver Prism, which are always super iconic across all sports. And it's not perfect, it's not a PSA 10, but it's good enough for me. And I think you guys, I don't need to explain too much why I love this card. So guys, that's going to end the video. I appreciate everyone listening, guys, for watching, and I'll see you again here at the start of 2023 for